Story 1. The Man in the Bushes. A Valentine's Day to remember for the wrong reasons. Love stories rarely start with fear. They begin with excitement, with butterflies, with stolen glances, and the rush of anticipation. That's how it was with Lisa and me. I had met her through Instagram, and after a few weeks of light-hearted conversations and casual flirting, we met in person. She was smart, beautiful, and had a laugh that made the world seem a little brighter. By the time Valentine's Day arrived, we had been on several dates and everything felt effortless. For the first time in a while, I was actually looking forward to the holiday. But then, Lisa told me about him. His name was Eric. At first, he was just some guy from her college, a classmate she had once worked with on a group project. But he had latched onto her, lingering in hallways, showing up at places she never mentioned going to, texting her from unknown numbers. And the worst part? He had found out where she lived. Lisa never gave him her address. He had either followed her home, watched her long enough to figure it out, or worse, he had been there before. Her plan was simple: ignore him. Don't give him the attention he craved. That would have been a fine strategy if Eric had been a normal creep, the kind who eventually gets bored and moves on. But he wasn't. As Valentine's Day approached, the messages started again. Long, obsessive texts that she never responded to. At first they were desperate, then angry, and then unsettlingly calm. Lisa brushed them off. Then one night, she found a box of chocolates on her doorstep. The brand was Russell Stover, wrapped in gold foil. It came with no note, just a text that followed minutes later. "I hope you like the gift I left you." Lisa's face had gone pale when she showed me the message. "He's been here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. That was the first time she truly looked scared, and that was when I promised her that no matter what, I wasn't going to let him do anything to her. If Eric tried again, I told her we'd go to the police together. Lisa had sighed, biting her lip. "I don't want to make a big deal out of this. I just hope he stops." I didn't agree, but I let it slide. Maybe she was right, maybe he would stop. But I doubted it. Valentine's night, a watchful shadow. Our Valentine's dinner was supposed to be a distraction. We picked a beautiful waterfront restaurant, one where the lights reflected off the water and the sound of gentle waves set the perfect mood. The food was amazing, the atmosphere romantic, and for the first time in weeks, Lisa was actually smiling without worry. Then, we saw him. A lone figure sat on a bench outside the restaurant, positioned near the parking lot. His hat was pulled low over his face, and though he wasn't facing us, his posture seemed too tense, too deliberate. Lisa noticed him first and made a joke, nudging my arm. "What if that's Eric?" We both laughed, but the laughter died in our throats the moment the man moved. He tilted his head slightly in our direction, as if listening. Then, as if realizing we were looking, he abruptly turned away. Seconds later, he stood up and walked off into the darkness.
Whoa.
Lisa stared at me, her eyes wide. "Josh, do you think?" I grabbed her hand. "It's fine, he's gone." But in my gut, I didn't believe that. We tried to move past it, shifting the conversation to other things, but an unease lingered. I could feel Lisa glancing toward the parking lot every few minutes, and I couldn't blame her. I was doing the same. The backyard visitor. After dinner, we decided to go back to my place. It felt safer than hers. I lived in a rental house in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where nothing ever happened. That night, we curled up on the couch, watching an old horror movie Lisa had picked. The tension from dinner had finally faded. Then, she stiffened. "Did you hear that?" A noise, faint but distinct. Something shifting outside. I paused the movie, listening. A second later, we heard it again, a soft thud. Lisa looked at me. "Is someone out there?" My heart was beating a little faster now. "Stay here," I said, grabbing my phone and heading to the back patio. I stepped outside, the cool air hitting me instantly. The yard was silent, but something felt off. I turned on my flashlight and swept it across the area. That's when I saw it. The entire stack of beach chairs, previously leaning against the house, had been knocked over. There was no wind, No reason for them to have fallen. I took a slow step forward, scanning the bushes that bordered the yard. Then, something moved. I froze. A shadow. Tall and thin, lurking just beyond the tree line. It wasn't an animal. It was a man. The realization sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. My grip tightened on my phone. "Who's there?" I called out. The figure didn't answer, but it moved, and then, suddenly, it lunged. I barely had time to react before he came stumbling out of the bushes, tripping over a branch in his rush toward me. His foot caught, and he staggered forward, giving me just enough time to act. I tackled him to the ground. He thrashed beneath me, but I managed to pin him. His breath was hot and ragged, his body squirming desperately. That's when Lisa ran out. Her breath caught in her throat when she saw him. "Oh my God," she whispered, "that's Eric." My stomach dropped. It was him. The police arrived within minutes. They pulled Eric off the ground, shoving him into handcuffs as he spat curses under his breath. Lisa clutched my arm, trembling. One of the officers asked if we wanted to press charges. Lisa nodded, finally done being scared. Yes. Eric was charged with trespassing and harassment. He never contacted Lisa again. But I'll never forget the moment I saw him in the bushes, waiting, watching. And I'll always wonder, if I hadn't gone outside, what would he have done next?
Story 2. The Creepy Couple. A Valentine's date turned nightmare. Valentine's Day was supposed to be romantic. A night of laughter, love, and a fancy dinner. That's how I envisioned it when my boyfriend Dylan and I arrived at one of our favorite restaurants, expecting a cozy, intimate evening. Instead, we were met with an unexpected 45-minute wait. It wasn't ideal, but we were happy to spend the time together, so we shrugged it off and stood near the entrance, scrolling through our phones and chatting. That's when we saw them. A middle-aged couple sat on a bench just outside the restaurant, positioned in a way that made them impossible to ignore. At first, they seemed ordinary enough, just another couple waiting for a table. But there was something unsettling about them. The woman, in particular, had a fixed, almost unnatural smile. Her eyes were too wide, her gaze locked on us as if she had been waiting for our attention. And then she stood up. She moved toward us with deliberate slowness, like someone creeping up behind a child to startle them. "You two," she said, her voice sugary sweet, "are such a beautiful couple." I forced a polite smile. "Thanks." The woman extended her hand, and I hesitated before shaking it. Her grip was firm, too tight for comfort. "My name's Mrs. Grady," she said, "and this is my husband." The man, who had yet to speak, only nodded. His face was expressionless, his dark eyes scanning us like we were objects, not people. "I know this sounds strange," Mrs. Grady continued, "but my husband and I are photographers, and when we saw you two, we knew we had to ask. We'd love to do a quick photo session with you both, free of charge, of course." I stiffened. A photo session? On Valentine's Day? Dylan, sensing my unease, cleared his throat. "That's kind of you, but we have plans." Mrs. Grady's smile didn't falter. "Oh, it won't take long, just a short drive to our studio, about 5 minutes away." She gestured toward the parking lot. A single black car sat there. No license plate. The unease in my stomach curled into something worse. Fear. Dylan shook his head firmly. "We'll have to pass. Thanks, though." For the first time, the woman's expression changed. The smile faded, just for a fraction of a second. Then, just as quickly, it was back. All right, she said with a chuckle. "Just thought I'd ask." She turned and walked back to her husband, who hadn't spoken a single word. Dylan leaned in and whispered, "That was weird, right?" I nodded. Really weird. Trying to shake it off, we decided to kill time at a nearby mini golf course. It was almost empty when we got there, which made sense. It was Valentine's night, and most couples probably had better things to do. We laughed as we played, finally starting to relax. Then, the bell at the entrance chimed. I turned toward the sound, and my stomach dropped. It was them, Mrs. Greddy and her silent husband. Her eyes scanned the chorus, and the moment she spotted me, her lips curled into the same eerie smile. "What a coincidence," she sang. Dylan stiffened beside me. I knew we were both thinking the same thing. This wasn't a coincidence. They had followed us here. The thought made my blood run cold. Dylan forced a chuckle. "Crazy, right?" The husband finally spoke, his voice deep and monotone. "You two should play against us." "No thanks," I said quickly. Mrs. Greddy pouted, shaking her head. "Come on, Greddy versus Rod. It'll be fun." My breath caught in my throat. Rod. Dylan's last name was Rodman. We had never told them that. Dylan tensed. His face had gone pale. "How do you know my name?" The woman just smiled. "Oh, we know a lot about you." That was it. We left. A dark road, a dangerous pursuit. The drive back to Dylan's house was quiet. Too quiet. I could tell he was rattled, and so was I. "Really knew your name," I whispered. Dylan's grip tightened on the wheel. "Yeah, I know." We turned onto the long road that led to his house, a stretch of asphalt lined by nothing but dense trees. It was always eerie at night, but tonight, it felt suffocating. Then, I glanced at the rearview mirror. The car, black, no license plate, following us. Dylan noticed it too. "They're following us," he said through gritted teeth. My heart pounded. What do we do? Dylan exhaled sharply. "We lose them." He pressed the gas. The car behind us matched our speed. Then, bang. The whole car jolted. Dylan swore, yanking the wheel as we skidded to a stop. Both front tires completely blown. I gasped. "What the hell?" Dylan's face was pale. "They set this up." Then he grabbed my hand. "We have to run." I hesitated. Shouldn't we stay in the car? But the fear in his eyes was undeniable. "No, we don't have time. They're coming." He cut the engine, turned off the lights, and unlocked the doors. We ran. The second we hit the tree line, Dylan pulled me down behind a thick cluster of bushes. "Stay low," he whispered. I held my breath. The car engine. Then, with footsteps, slow, deliberate. I peeked through the branches. A shadow moved near Dylan's car. Then, a voice. "It took too long, Mrs. Grady." Her voice was sing-songy, almost playful. A car door slammed. Then, the sound of tires screeching. We waited. 5 minutes. 10. Finally, Dylan whispered, "I think they're gone." We called the police. When they arrived, the black car was gone. No trace of Mrs. Greddy or her husband. The officers checked the road. Our tires had been slashed. But there was nothing else. No leads, no evidence. The police told us they'd investigate, but I could tell they didn't take it seriously. Dylan's car was towed, and my sister picked us up. For days, we couldn't stop thinking about them. Who were they? What did they want? We never found out. But one thing still keeps me awake at night. When we were hiding in the woods, just before she spoke, I swear I heard her laugh. She knew exactly where we were.
Story 3. The Girl Who Wasn't Normal. A Tinder date turned nightmare. I always thought dating apps were a gamble. Sometimes you get lucky, and sometimes you end up with a story you wish you could forget. Looking back, I wish my story was something simple, like an awkward first date or a bad kiss. But what happened with her, with Ashley, was something I will never shake. It started like any other online match. Ashley was cute, shoulder-length blonde hair, bright blue eyes, freckles dusted across her nose. She had this innocent, bookish look, like the kind of girl who spent rainy afternoons curled up with a novel instead of hitting the club scene. We started talking a few days before Valentine's Day, and our conversations were surprisingly good. She was funny, sarcastic in a charming way, and we had similar interests. She wasn't into the bar scene either, preferred quiet nights in, watching movies. When I asked if she wanted to go out on Valentine's Day, she agreed without hesitation. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. The date that started it all. Valentine's Day fell on a Thursday that year. Luckily, I didn't have Friday classes, and neither did Ashley. "We won't have to cut the night short," she had said, her voice teasing. At the time, I thought she was flirting. Now, I wonder if she meant something else entirely. The night started normal enough. We got McDonald's, she insisted it was her guilty pleasure. Then saw a movie at the local theater. It was nice, easy. Nothing about her raised any red flags. Afterward, we walked around downtown, the streets still lit up with string lights from the holiday season. Snow flurries drifted down lazily, and Ashley pulled her coat tighter around her, grinning at me. "I'm having fun," she said. "Me too." It felt right, comfortable. When we got back to my apartment, she didn't hesitate to come inside. We watched a horror movie, her pick, and by the time the credits rolled, she looked at me and smiled. "Mind if I stay the night?" she asked. Of course, I said yes. I should have said no. The midnight awakening. I'm a light sleeper, always have been. It's like my brain refuses to shut off completely, always alert for the smallest sound. That's why when I woke up around 3 a.m., I knew something was wrong. The bed was colder than it should have been. Ashley wasn't beside me. My first thought was that she had gone to the bathroom, but there was no light coming from under the door. Then I heard it, a creak from the far side of the room. Slow, deliberate. I turned over, my eyes adjusting to the darkness. Ashley was standing in the corner of my bedroom, completely still. Her back was to me, her arms hanging limp at her sides. Her head was slightly tilted like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. A chill ran down my spine. "Ashley," I whispered. She didn't move. My mouth went dry. My heartbeat pounded against my ribs. Something wasn't right. I reached over and turned on the small bedside lamp. The dim light flickered, casting weak shadows across the room. Ashley remained frozen in place. "Ashley?" I said again, my voice stronger this time. Still nothing. I swung my legs over the bed, slowly approaching her. My skin prickled with unease. Then, without warning, she turned. Her movement was too fast, unnatural, like a puppet yanked on a string. And she screamed. Not a normal scream, not a startled gasp or a cry of fear. A shriek, raw and primal, like something that wasn't human. Before I could react, she lunged at me, her hands clawing at my chest, her fingers digging into my skin. I stumbled back, barely catching myself as she swung at me again. Her face, her expression, was empty. Her eyes were wide, but there was nothing behind them. No emotion, no recognition. Just rage. I raised my arms, blocking her blows as she kept hitting me, her screams never ceasing. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. She froze. Her breath was ragged, her body trembling. And then she bolted. She snatched up her clothes, ran out of my room, and before I could even move, I heard my front door slam shut. She was gone. I stood there, my chest heaving, my mind racing. What the hell just happened? The horror left behind. I locked the door immediately. Then, shaking, I turned toward my bathroom. The smell hit me first. Rotten, putrid. I gagged, covering my nose as I reached for the light. The second it flicked on, my stomach turned. The shower curtain had been ripped down, my medicine cabinet thrown open, bottles of shampoo and soap spilled across the floor, water pooled near the sink as if the faucet had been left running and then suddenly turned off. But the worst part, the absolute worst part, was the mirror. Something had been smeared across it, a brownish stain, thick and foul. My stomach lurched. It was human waste. She had defecated and smeared it on my mirror. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't just a bad date. This wasn't just a breakdown. This was something else. Something wrong? I grabbed my phone and called the police. The Vanishing Act. When the officers arrived, I told them everything. "She attacked you?" one of them asked. I nodded. I don't know why. She was fine before that. They took my statement, then asked if I had any contact information for her. I pulled up her Tinder profile. Gone. Her Snapchat? Deleted. I only had one picture of her, a screenshot she had sent me on Snapchat, using a filter that put tiny hearts around her face. I showed the officers. One of them frowned. "You sure this is a real person?" The words sent a shiver down my spine. They took the report but didn't seem convinced anything would come of it. "Probably just someone off their meds," one officer muttered. "If she comes back, let us know." I never saw Ashley again. The 3 a.m. visit. A few nights later, I had a friend Rob stay over. I told him everything. "She said she was taking the same class as you," I reminded him. "You ever see her?" Rob looked at the picture, his face darkening. "I've never seen this girl in my life," he said. My stomach turned. We stayed up late watching movies, trying to push the weirdness out of my mind. Then, around 3 a.m., a sound. The doorknob. Someone was trying to get in. I bolted upright. Rob did the same. The handle jiggled. We didn't move. It lasted for maybe a minute. Then, silence. I crept to the peephole, heart hammering. Nothing. No footsteps, no retreating shadow. Just nothing. To this day, I don't know what happened to Ashley. I don't know who or what she really was. But sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear my doorknob rattle. And I wonder, did she ever really leave?